So obviously, with the election going on, things are really hectic right now. Um, and this video is going to be a little bit dated. I mean, within about a week, people are going to look at this video and be like, "That was a long time ago." And usually, I try to avoid that. Usually, I try to make it where my videos are somewhat timeless. I try not to talk a lot about current events because, I look at people like Steven Crowder who can make these amazing current events video. But a year later, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I remember that, and I I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want that to be the thing for me. But we are in a historical moment right now. Last I saw on the election map, Joe Biden is projected to have 290 electoral college votes, which means that if he gets in, it's unlikely that 21 of those votes would end up voting the other way and say, no, this guy did not win this election fairly. We're going to go against this and vote for Trump, because technically the Electoral College can do that, but it's unlikely. So, and obviously the Trump team, they're working very hard with lawsuits to show that, hey, there was voter fraud, and there is a lot of documentation of voter fraud. You can see it on video, for crying out loud. You have it where monitors weren't being allowed to come into the polling places, or observers weren't being allowed to come into the polling places. And even with a court order, on videos, like, hey, I'm a lawyer, I've been a lawyer for 30 years, here's my court order. And they're like, oh, well, we'll get back to you in a few days. Really? So I talked the other day about what I think about that. But somebody said it's kind of like this. It's almost like saying, well, I won the poker game, but I'm not going to show you my cards. So the lack of transparency itself is fraud. I think those are two, even though they might technically be different, it's like, hey, if you're fighting against transparency, you are engaging in fraud. It's like that CEO I talked about yesterday, that hypothetical CEO who brings his secretary to the hotel room and they stay there overnight. I might not be able to prove what's going on, but everybody knows what's going on. So anyway, things are frustrating right now in the political arena. But as a lot of people have pointed out, God is still king. The nation of Israel, way back when, they said, well, we don't want to have the system of government that God set up for us. We want to have a king. And they demanded a king, and it became a problem. The United States, historically, we did the opposite. We said we don't want a king. And we said that men are endowed with inalienable rights by their creator. So essentially, God is our king, and the president was basically meant to have an office role. Abraham Lincoln, apparently, back in the day, you could go and knock on the door of the White House, and Abraham Lincoln would answer the door and sit down and chit-chat with you. I find that amazing that happened. My understanding is that happened even during the Civil War. So, how mind-blowing that is, by today's standards, it's truly amazing. With all of that, like we said, God is still king, God is still sovereign. I am reading a book right now by a man named A.W. Pink, called The Life and Times of Elijah. Now, I didn't look up when A.W. Pink lived before recording this video, but I'm presuming he was late 1800s, early 1900s, and I could be totally wrong on that. Maybe he's somebody who lived in the 1980s for all I know. Maybe he's somebody who's still alive over at a university. I don't know. I'd never heard of this author, and I picked up this book, and I was like, hey, this is good. Very in-depth teaching, gives me a lot of the historical context about Elijah. And it talks about how Israel was a wicked nation and how at one point they had rejected the Lord as being God. And instead they decided to worship the Baals. And so those who were faithful to the Lord were very much in the minority. And we see that a lot in the churches today. You have it where you have Christian organizations, you have InterVarsity, you have Southern Baptist theological seminaries, rejecting Orthodox Christianity, rejecting clear biblical teaching. And that's an issue. That's a real issue. We're seeing basically the same thing happen in the United States. We're seeing the same thing happen within the church. It's like even our churches are not faithful to God. So what do you do with that? I think it's important to remember that God is still in control, and he likes to have the deck stacked against himself. I don't know if Trump will be able to pull out of this. I don't know if maybe we can have a Trump 2024 ticket. Even with obvious cheating going on. But at the end of the day, God is still in control. And I'm not going to do any of this moral relativism nonsense of, will different people feel different ways about politics. It's like, no. The government is there to protect the individual rights of its citizens. And if they're not doing that, then they've lost the right to govern. And it just amazes me. You'll have people say, well, healthcare is a human right, but then they want to say, well, guns are not a human right, and that's a whole thing we can get into. But rejecting all of the moral relativism within the church, rejecting the whole, well, you can feel whatever way you want about politics, that's garbage. That belongs in the trash. And if there's a pastor saying that, he needs to step down from being a pastor. That's like saying you can feel whatever you want about slavery. No, it's totally unacceptable. And I'm probably doing a terrible job in this video, but God is still king. There's been so many times in the history of believers where things seemed impossible, and God came through. And Noah lived in a world that was wicked, and God sent the flood. Abraham and Sarah weren't able to have children together, but God gave them a son. And he gave them one son, and from this son came the nation of Israel. I mean, how incredible is that? So, I mean, you look at the life and times of Elijah. Israel was wicked. Israel had turned away from God, and this one prophet was speaking against them. And through this prophet, God caused it not to rain. I mean, it's incredible. And we still have a nation where there's a lot of people here who love the Lord. There's also a lot of people who don't love the Lord but have not completely rejected reason. And there's one illustration. I'm kind of hesitant to bring it up, but it's one that works for me. There's a card game I've played before. It's a trading card game, and I'm not going to say the name of it because I don't want people thinking that I'm necessarily endorsing it. Because I'll say there's content in the game that I have reservations about, but I also think there's a lot of good things to it. So I'm kind of on the fence about what I should say about it publicly, because I don't want to take a handful of objectionable things, even if they're quite objectionable to me, and just totally dismiss an entire franchise. At the same time, I don't want to fall into the trap of, oh, it's just a game, play whatever you want, sort of thing. So for now, I'm not going to say what the name of the card game is. And that's probably going to get me some comments, but okay. But anyway, in this card game, you play as, you have two players playing against each other, and you start out with having 20 life points for each player. And just from that, some of you will probably know what this game is. And then you have like these different creatures and different soldiers they bring onto the field, and they will battle with one another. And the first time I bought a deck of these cards, it was an angel-themed deck. Now, these aren't biblical angels, so these aren't angels the way we would think of them in a biblical context. So this would be a separate race of angels. This would be these are very powerful human-shaped creatures that have wings. And in this game, I think they're all female. I don't know if there's any male angels, but there's this one card that if you draw it and you play it, it's this female angel, and you bring her into play, and all of your human characters come back from the dead. And I think that's very interesting. Now, if you want to look it up, it's called Angel of Glory Rise. And you'll probably figure out what the franchise is. And again, I'm not necessarily endorsing this franchise. And I don't want to say... I also don't want to be, moral relativist about it. I don't want to just say, hey, anybody can believe whatever they want. Because, I do think that there are reasons back and forth to say Christians should or should not play this game. And I get there is going to be some subjectivity. But anyway, so you play this card, Angel of Glory Rise. All of your human characters come back from the dead. And a lot of the human characters, when they come back from the dead, they give life back to the player. So a lot of the cards I had, when I started out, this human character, when this one comes back from the dead and comes back into play, you get 3 life points. So not only did I have quite a number of times where I was down to like 1 life point, and maybe 2 or 3, but oftentimes it was down to 1 life point. I was about to lose the game in 1 turn, played this card, and everything changed. And I came back and won the game. So I know that the way I'm explaining it might be a little complicated, but instead of having 1 life point, I might come back and have like 23 life points. And then I have this massive army, and then I go and I'm able to beat the other guy. And of course, some people might not like, oh, well, you've got an army where different characters are battling one another. Hey, you know what? If you're going to object to that, then you've got to object to chess. Just saying. But anyway, your army goes and you beat the other guy and you win. And I think it's very appropriate, this Angel of Glory Rise thing, because you do see this kind of parallel to Christianity, where we believe that Jesus Christ is going to come back someday, and those who believe in Jesus, we're going to be raised back from the dead. And it's not going to be like we're ghosts and we're just going to have a new body created from scratch. Even our old bodies, they're going to be raised from the dead and be made into new bodies. So, that pile of bones, that was somebody's great-great-grandpa that's buried in a tomb somewhere and is just dust now, it's totally forgotten about it. Those bones, they're going to come back and be a human being again. And they're going to be a greater human being than they were when they were physically alive on Earth. And so we're going to have physical bodies again. And where am I going with all this? It's not just, end times thing. It's not just, well, the world is going to be dark. It's not just that, hey, things are going to be bad. It's that even when things seem bad, God can still turn things around and use them for good. In the case of Donald Trump, we've seen an incredible amount of support for him from minorities. So this stranglehold that Democrats have had on Black Americans, on Hispanic Americans, for way too long, it seems like that's being broken. So even if we do have a Joe Biden's presidency, and I don't think this is the way the election was done was legitimate, but worst case scenario, say we have a Joe Biden presidency, and say they take a lot of power in Congress. I think there is still a lot of potential for us to come back from that. There's still a lot of potential to say, hey, the Democrats, not all of them, but on a large scale, they tend to be against school choice. They tend to be against charter schools. Whereas President Trump fought for charter schools and fought for school choice. You want to open up a business. I think there's a lot that can be said there. Now, I also hear a lot from Christians, hey, our home is not here, our home is in heaven, and that's true. But I'm 31 years old. Lord willing, I'll still be around for a while, another 50, 60 years, hopefully at least. I hope I'm here for another 80, 90, 100 years. I hope I live for a long time. I hope I live for a long time physically here on this earth. I would love to go home and be with the Lord, but I see that there's a lot of important things to do here. And as a human being, I was initially created to live on this earth. I was initially created to be in an Edenic paradise with God. And that's not what this place is anymore. I mean, this place is passing away. This place is not our home. But we are called to be salt and light. And I want to encourage people, be salt and light. Don't give in to this. Don't give in to Drag Queen Story Hour. Don't give in to killing babies because they're inconvenient. Don't be giving into this killing babies after they're born. This is not the way things should be. And so I want to encourage you guys and say, hey, you're not alone. This is not the end of the world. And for those of you who play games, like computer games, board games, card games, things like that, I'm sure you've probably seen a time when it seemed like, the enemy was just about to crush you, and something happens, and you're able to reverse things and go back the other way. And that's kind of interesting because, God often lets the deck be stacked against himself before he does something amazing. And I also think it is important to remember that as wonderful as Donald Trump is as a president, and it is as a president, he isn't Jesus Christ. I think we should honor President Donald Trump. I think we should thank God that he was our president for 4 years. I mean, this was a very, very good president. He wasn't perfect. There were definitely things that I think he did wrong. But, I mean, you look at, compared to so many presidents, especially in the last 100 years, I'm like, he did a pretty good job. And there's a lot we can say about that. We can say, hey, we really shouldn't be having such a strong centralized federal government. We really should have it where they are limited to the powers that are given to them in the Constitution, and that there's not these unelected agencies creating laws out of whole cloth. That said, we do have to live on this earth, but we have to remember the God whom we serve. We serve the God who created not only this earth, but created the whole universe. Who created that bug that I filmed yesterday and posted to my Facebook page. Um, I think there's a lot that we can say. Um, so I just want to remind everybody, don't let your heart be troubled. And my heart's been troubled with this. I could say I've been very stressed about this. It's been bothering me. It's been really bothering me the past few days. But don't let your heart be troubled. It's okay that, hey, we're going to be troubled in the moment, and we might be bothered by things. I mean, when the world is falling apart all around you, it's a natural instinct, it's a natural reaction to say, hey, I'm really bothered by that. And if you're not, then either your faith is very strong, which is good for you, or maybe something's wrong and you're not being honest about what's going on with yourself. But even when the world is falling apart around you, even when you're at the edge of the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army is coming towards you, God is still in control. God can still part the Red Sea. God can still bring down the pillar of fire to prevent the Egyptian army from coming to you. But remember it when he does. After you cross through the Red Sea, after you see that miracle, when you get to the other side, don't complain. Don't complain and say, oh, you just brought us out into the wilderness to die. We don't have enough water. We don't have enough food. It seems like within hours after being freed from the Egyptian army, yet the Israelites complaining. Don't be like that. Just don't be like that. Remember, God is still good. God is still in control. And I'm saying this to myself as much as to anybody else. Because I have trouble really trusting that God is going to take care of me. So, anyway, thank you for watching this video. I really hope I encourage somebody. And on another positive note, I am very happy to say that I'm losing a lot of weight, and I'm happy about that. So that's a blessing God is doing in my life. So thank you for watching this video, and leave comments, subscribe to my newsletter. You can go to my website, greenslug.com. Slug is spelled with 2 G's, and right on the home page, you scroll down, there's a place where you can sign up for my newsletter. And this way, God forbid, YouTube ever were to disappear, or Medium were ever to disappear, I can still tell you guys, hey, this is where to find my content. I've moved over here. So, thanks for taking this time to watch this video. Comment, and let me know how you're doing. Feel free to chat in the comments section, because you're not alone. I mean, tens of millions of people are seeing this. Don't be like the prophet who said, God, I'm the only prophet left. And God says, hey, I've got hundreds over in this cave over here. You're not the only one. And in the case of the United States, there's tens of millions of people who see what's going on and see that it's wrong. Who are saying, hey, this doesn't make any sense. How did Joe Biden, who could barely get more than a handful of people to a rally, whereas Trump had these huge rallies, how did he win the election? I mean, perhaps there's just that many people who just don't like Trump. Possibly. But what's going on doesn't make sense, and it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be frustrated, upset. Like, be angry, but let yourself get that anger out, and then don't let your heart be troubled. Just know God is still in control. God still loves you, and persecution and things like that, those are a real possibility. But whatever God has us go through, this is something I've learned from Cody Leibold's ministry. It's like, whatever God is causing us to go through, the reward on the other end of that is going to be so great that you're going to say, you know what, I'm not even worried about the loss. And maybe that's tough to say, like when somebody loses a loved one to cancer, when somebody loses a child to cancer, but all of the suffering, Paul talks about this too. The suffering we go through, it won't compare to the reward, to the good things that God has on the other end of that. So there are good things. Like, God didn't just give us here to suffer. We don't exist just for the sake of self-sacrifice. Like, self-sacrifice is always towards something greater. That's if it's biblical sacrifice, self-sacrifice, and if it's in the will of God. Like, you don't exist for self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is not an end in of itself. It is not the thing itself. It is towards something greater. So anyway, let me stop this video because I will go on forever. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and talk to me in the comments section.